In this video, we'll show you how to remove and replace rear brakes on a Toyota 4Runner. To remove the wheel, you can take the center cap off first. There's a slot right here, and there's probably one on the opposite side. I like to take a little hook, and you can put a piece of cloth behind there, pop that cover. Get that cover off there. 21mm socket, and remove the lug nuts. Disconnect the, well, not disconnect, sorry. Remove the boot off that bleeder screw. Set it aside, make sure you keep it because you're going to reuse it. 10mm socket. We're going to break that bleeder screw free so we can push that piston back. Then just snug it up. You just want to be able to make sure you can do that when the caliper's hanging freely. 17mm socket or wrench. Remove the slider pins. There's one and the top one. If you don't have a swivel socket, you're probably going to have to use a hand wrench or socket and ratchet. Remove the pins. Take note, there is no difference between the top and the bottom on this, so you're all set on that. You don't have to worry about it. Now I can just take a pry bar or screwdriver. Let's wiggle this out. Get that caliper right out. And I'm going to take my tool and I'm going to push back this piston. Now I have a catch bucket below. Now I can effortlessly open this bleeder screw, just like that, 10mm. And I'm going to stop pushing this piston back. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's an ABS system, and I do not want to push any fluid backwards in an ABS module to cause any possible damage for an internal damage on that ABS module. Once that piston's bottomed out, it was nice and smooth. I know it's in good shape. It didn't get hung up. I can just grab my 10mm and snug this again. Just like that. Now remove the tool. The good thing about this area is I have a nice seated area right up here for that caliper. It won't hang down. Now we're going to take the caliper bracket off of the knuckle or differential, 17mm socket, and there's two mounting bolts, one on the bottom. Like I said, that's a 17mm. Now we can take this bracket with the pads right out of there, and I put that on a bench to take those pads out, clean that up, and that way I can identify where the indicator, where it goes on each pad, take it from there. So now with the caliper bracket off, you can check and see if your rotor will come off. This one does not, so that means that the parking shoes are extended past that rust slip. So I'm going to take the window that has a little opening to it, and on this particular vehicle, the adjuster is down here. So we're going to take a flathead screwdriver, a small one, and see if we can get in there and back off the adjustment. So when you rotate this rotor, make sure you find the one that lets the screwdriver go all the way through. There's one that has a stopper on the back. So the adjuster on this 4Runner is on the bottom part, it's not on the top. And if you look, you can just barely see the adjuster part, little stars, and you're going to spin this so that you can feel that back off the adjustment. Can you hear that a little bit? And to make sure I'm going the right way, I'll turn it a little bit and then I'll just went the right way. So on this particular one, it was in that motion. Take the rotor right off. So now with the rotor off, we're going to clean up our hub and get ready to put on the new brakes. Now you can use a wire brush, a hand wire brush, or some sandpaper. I don't recommend a cookie that has like a green sandpaper to it because you can eat up that hub. That's not what we're doing. So right behind the stud where it meets the actual hub, you can't get in there, so I'm just going to use a little wire brush, to sand it, or sandpaper, whichever you have available. You want to make sure there's no rust chunks back there because it'll hold that rotor uneven. Take your parts cleaner, clean it up. You can also take advantage right now and clean those parking shoes or e-brake shoes. I got my bucket underneath, make sure it's going in. So now we have the caliper bracket with the pads in it. We're going to take them apart so we can clean up the bracket. I'm just going to tap them out. And that's the outer. And I see no indicator for pad wear on that one. Let's try this one. That's the inner pad. And there it is. So you want to make sure you put that back on the new pad, that indicator on the right spot. So we'll set those aside. Take our tins off. You just need a flathead screwdriver. Just pop them off. You need to note how they go. Make sure that the clip that sticks out is on the outside of each and every one. There's 4 individual ones. We're going to clean up this bracket, make sure it has no more rust on it. I'll have a nice clean surface for these shims to sit. So I like to take this over to a wire wheel, or you can actually use a nice strong wire brush and make sure you get right in there. That's the point. So make sure you have a nice clean flat surface. Do this to both top and bottom sides of it. You want to take a good look at the actual bracket itself and the boots. Make sure these boots have no tears. Examine them all the way around. They look pretty good. Actually, I don't even need to take a wire wheel brush to that. It's in pretty good shape there. So I'll take some parts cleaner and I'll just clean up the rest of the dirt. I'll put our shims back on. Make sure we get all that nasty dust off. Let that air dry. Meanwhile, we're going to open up our packet. Comes with the brake pads. We have enough for both sides, of course, because you're going to do both left and right rear. And here's our indicators. Those are the ones I was talking about. And there's the shims. So I'm going to take some caliper grease, a light coat, and you want to put it on the bottom part of the shims, not the top. You want to make sure that rust does not form in between here, water gets trapped, and it'll push those tins up. And when it does that, it's going to cause those pads to seize right in place. So this is underneath the tins. Stops water from building up and causing rust. So you can see how this one has the tab on the outside. So I'm going to bring it around and make sure I put it in a place where the tab goes on the outside. Short front of it goes on the front. Just bring it in, push it down. Just like that. You can make sure it's seated all the way. Now let's get this one. And that is actually going to go right over here. You can see the tabs on the back. The longer one will help you flex it. So if you put it on the shorter one first, then you can flex it down, push it over. Just like that. Do the same to the other side. Okay, those are all in place. Now before I put the pads on, I like to take some dielectric grease or high-paste silicone. So on the sliders you can use caliper grease. I personally like to use a silicone paste. So a lot of people use a silicone paste. It's high temperature and it does not break down. And I'm just going to fill it in there, put some in, do it on both sides. Now I know that this is the inner and that's the outer. We saw that the inner pad had that indicator on it. So the pads come with just the shims on the back. There's no front or inner or outer. So I'm going to grab one of them and I'm going to take my indicator. I'm going to match it up to that, see where it goes. So it sits just like this, right on that little ear that sticks out. Make sure you push it all the way down. And that little tin piece right there is an indicator of when that pad will be right about, got a 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch left to it. Tells you a warning that you need brakes. So now we're going to put that pad in the inner side. I'm going to put this piece down first. And you can just push it right into place, just like that. Line it up. Perfect. And do the other side. This one doesn't have any indicator on it. Factory does not install one, so we don't put one in. So do the same on this side. Just like that. Now we're going to install our rotor, and then we can put our bracket with pads on. So now our hub's all dry. We're going to spray some high temp Never Seize or anti-seize on that. I just don't want that hub ever getting rusted again against the steel rotor. Now we want to make sure that we line up so that we can adjust those parking shoes again. So let's give it a shot. There it is. That's the opening part so that we can get to that. I'm going to put one lug nut on so I can spin this wheel comfortably to make sure it's centered and adjusted properly. The parking brake. Make sure you push it nice and flat against that hub and just hand snug that up. Perfect. So now that I know that rotor's on there, you can feel there's no drag. I want to feel some drag because I want those parking shoes to be adjusted properly. So I'm going to put my screwdriver in there. I'm going to find that adjuster. And I know that I went in the up position to back off, so I'm going to go now from the top of the spindle and down. Go a little bit at a time. And what you're feeling, you want to feel some drag. Hear that scraping sound? That's what I'm looking for. Not too much, see? Went overboard, you can't turn that. Back it off, a couple of turns. That's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. So now we can install our caliper bracket with the pads on it. Slide it right in. Grab your mounting bolts. Start it by hand. There we go. I'm just going to snug them up with a 17mm socket. Then we'll torque them to spec. So the two mounting bolts for the bracket to the differential is a 17mm socket, and the torque is 74 foot-pounds. Let's do this to the bottom, double check. So make sure your pads are seated all the way in, and you can take your caliper, make sure the hose isn't twisted in any way, line that right up, slide it over, get those boots to line up with the thread holes, just like that. So now the pins, I'm just going to take the old paste off, make sure that they're in good shape, which they are. I'm going to put a fresh little thin coat of the silicone paste on there. Just a little extra dab on the top. I'm going to slide one pin in, hand thread it, and do the same to the top. That's a 17mm socket also, so I'm going to take a lightweight drive, 3/8, and just snug them up before I torque them. So now we're going to torque our caliper to bracket pins, and that's a 17mm socket, and the torque is 65 foot-pounds. So now our brakes are done on this side. I'm going to do the same to the other side. Once they're completed, I'm going to check my master, make sure my master cylinder's got plenty of brake fluid in it, check the cap for what type, whether it's .3, .4, and then I'm going to fill it, top it off, put the cap back on, pump the brakes up, make sure these pads seat and the piston pushes out. Then I will come back and open the bleeders one side at a time until all the air is out to gravity bleed it. Now that we're all done with the brakes, before we gravity bleed or pump the brakes up, we've opened the hood and we located the master cylinder. It's in the engine compartment right in front of the driver's seat. So we're going to take that cap off and we're going to see what type of brake fluid it takes. So we can see that it says .3. I got it right here. Only .3 or .4. So you can use both, and we're going to top that off so we can pump the brakes up. So you want to make sure you fill that master right up to the fill line. Might go a little bit over because I am going to continue gravity bleeding the brakes. So I'm going to put it right up in there so now I can pump up the brakes. Make sure you put that cover on. Now that we've topped our master off, replace the cover, pump the brakes up, we can open up this bleeder screw. We're just going to let it gravity bleed right out. I have my catch basin right there, and we'll just keep an eye on that. Make sure we see no air pockets. That looks pretty good, so we're going to close that up. And now you're going to go to the other side. Once it's good, put the cap back on and clean it. I'm going to make sure that's nice and snug. That's a 10mm wrench. And now I can take some parts cleaner and clean it up. Let's get rid of any other residue. So now you've gravity bled all the wheels. We're going to press the brake and start the vehicle up and see how the pedal feels. That is perfect. It's right there. That's a solid brake pedal. Much better than it was when it came in because the pads were worn down. And what you want to do is a quick test. Hold it and make sure it doesn't slowly seep down. If it does, then you're going to have to gravity bleed again. You'll have air in the system. This brake pedal is nice and firm, so we're ready to go. All right, now we can put our wheel on. Now, because this is a alloy rim, you're going to have some shank style on that lug nut. You want to hold that flush and start one of your lug nuts. You want to put it in hand tight so that those shanks of that lug nut sits and goes inside the aluminum. You don't want to force that in. Just like that. Now it's easier to guide the rest in place. And you can just put the rest in by hand. Grab your 21mm socket. And we're just going to snug them up and then torque them to factory spec. Always go in a crisscross pattern, just like a star. Now we can lower it and tighten it to factory spec. So the wheel torque for alloy rims, which is like aluminum rim, is 76 foot-pounds. Do again in a star pattern. Double check, always do it twice. Now we can put our center cap on. All right, we'll take our center cap, line it up, and then just tap it on. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.